The flag came down on a Wednesday. A warm Wednesday morning in late August when the cicadas were still singing and the hydrangeas along Clover Hill Lane were just beginning to fade. The kind of morning where nothing is supposed to go wrong. But Meredith Calloway-Shaw didn't believe in things like supposed to. She yanked the flagpole right out of the bracket with both hands, her ring light still set up on the sidewalk, her phone propped against a potted plant, recording everything for her 340,000 followers. She tossed the flag, stars and stripes, folded sharp as a crease, right into the bed of ornamental lavender she'd decided 3 weeks ago belonged to her. She looked into the camera and smiled. "There," she said, "that's better." On the porch next door, a man sat in a wooden rocking chair. He was 91 years old. He'd survived the Chasen Reservoir. He'd buried his wife of 58 years. He'd outlasted harder things than this. He watched the flag hit the ground. He didn't say a word. He just reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and set the mug back down on the armrest. And in that silence, that long, unbothered, dangerous silence, the story of what happened next began. Let me tell you about Clover Hill Lane. It sits in the town of Laurel Creek, North Carolina, a small community tucked into the western Piedmont, about 40 minutes outside of Greensboro. Population 9,200, one diner, one hardware store, two churches that had been feuding politely since 1987. And 17 houses arranged in a gentle curve around a cul-de-sac so quiet, so green, so perfectly American that film crews had used it twice as a backdrop. Once for a furniture catalog, once for a local insurance commercial. The summer of 2022 was long and golden in Laurel Creek. Kids rode bikes in the late afternoon. Mrs. Patricia Kowalski on the corner grew tomatoes the size of softballs. The Hendersons at number 6 had just put in a pool and were, by most accounts, deplorable about it in the best possible way. Every house on Clover Hill Lane had a flag. Not because anyone told them to, because they wanted to. There were 14 homes on that street, 14 flags, some on poles, some mounted flush to the porch trim, one lit up at night with a small solar spotlight. They weren't making a political statement. They were making a neighborhood statement. We are here, we are home, we are American. The house at number 7 had the tallest flagpole. It was a 12-foot steel pole, set in a concrete base that had been poured by hand in the spring of 1978. The flag that flew from it was 3 feet by 5 feet, regulation size, not decorative. It had been replaced twice in 40 years, each time with a proper burial ceremony in the backyard, witnessed by whoever on the block cared to attend. Most of them attended. Number 7 was where Walter Bay lived. Master Sergeant Walter James Bay, United States Army, retired. Born in 1931 in Busan, South Korea, to a Korean mother and an American father who'd come over as a missionary and stayed for love. Walter came to the United States at age 9, grew up in Greensboro, spoke English with a slight Carolina drawl that surprised people when they first heard it, earned his citizenship at 16, enlisted at 18, the week after the North Korean People's Army crossed the 38th parallel. He was 19 years old when he deployed to Korea. He served with the 2nd Infantry Division, 23rd Infantry Regiment. He was at the Chasen Reservoir in November and December of 1950, 17 days in temperatures that dropped to 30 below zero, surrounded, outnumbered, fighting his way out through Chinese forces that outnumbered his unit 10-1. Of the men in his platoon who went in, 6 came out. Walter Bay was one of the 6. He carried a man named Robert Bobby Dutching on his back for 3 miles through frozen mud and rifle fire. Bobby Dutching survived. Bobby Dutching had been Walter Bay's best friend for 72 years. Walter served until 1971, 21 years in uniform, Korea, then a peacetime posting in Germany, then 2 rotations in Vietnam as a senior NCO. He came home the second time in 1968 with a silver star, a purple heart, a bronze oak leaf cluster, and a right knee that never did work quite right again. He walked with a cane, a dark walnut cane he'd turned himself on a lathe in his garage, but he walked with his back straight and his chin level, and the young men in the neighborhood who didn't know who he was still got out of his way instinctively, without understanding why. He'd been widowed in 2009. His wife Alina had been a school teacher and an amateur botanist. She'd planted the lavender bed along the front property line in 1991 after they'd come back from a trip to Provence. She said the smell of it reminded her of the trip. Walter had never let the lavender die. He tended it every spring and fall with the same care she had. The flag, the lavender, the walnut cane. These were the things that mattered to Walter Bay. He was 91 years old. He still drove his 2004 Ford F-150 dark green, as clean as the day he bought it, to the hardware store on Saturdays. He still made his own coffee before sunrise. He still called Bobby Dutchin every Sunday evening at 6 o'clock, and they talked for an hour about baseball, about the news, about the old days. He was the kind of man who, when the neighborhood kids sold lemonade, always bought 2 cups and tipped $1. He was the kind of man the street had built itself around. And on the first day of July 2022, the house next door, number 5, Clover Hill Lane, went on the market. The moving truck arrived on a Friday. Not a regular moving truck, a specialty lifestyle logistics van, pearl white with a matte black logo on the side that said Lux Move in sans serif font that cost somebody a lot of money. Behind it came a pearl white 2022 Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT with a custom plate that read MERSHDF. Get it, Meredith, Meredith's brand, Mer's Shelf, because she was a lifestyle influencer. Home decor, wellness, elevated everyday living. 340,000 Instagram followers, 280,000 on TikTok. A YouTube channel, The Mer's Shelf Life, that had recently gone semi-viral on the back of a video called I Quit My Corporate Job to Live Authentically, and Here's My Income Breakdown. Her name was Meredith Calloway-Shaw. 34 years old, born in Charlotte, degree in communications from UNC Wilmington. Former marketing coordinator for a mid-size pharmaceutical company in Durham. She'd quit that job 18 months ago for her passion, she said in the video, which had 1.4 million views, and moved into content creation full-time. Her income breakdown, which she'd shared so transparently, involved $6,200 a month in brand deals and $1,900 in affiliate revenue. Not nothing, not as much as it sounded. She'd bought number 5 on Clover Hill Lane for one reason: aesthetics. The bones are incredible, she'd said in her house tour teaser video, filmed the day after closing. It's this gorgeous craftsman bungalow vibe. The street is literally a Pinterest board come to life, and I cannot wait to show you my renovation vision. She had said literally 4 times in 90 seconds. Her renovation vision included removing the wooden privacy fence between her yard and Walter Bay's yard because, and she said this to her contractor on the phone, loud enough for anyone walking by to hear, those old fence lines are so claustrophobic, and I need the sight lines for content. The first red flag came on her 3rd day on Clover Hill Lane. She walked across the grass to Walter's porch and knocked on the door, not to introduce herself, but to ask if he could maybe not sit outside when she was filming because the rocking chair creak was picking up on her mic. Walter Bay looked at her for a long moment. "Young lady," he said in that quiet Carolina drawl, "I've been sitting on this porch since before you were born." She smiled the way people smile when they are not actually listening. "Totally," she said. "I just mean like on filming days, I'll let you know in advance." She walked back across the grass and looked directly into her phone camera. "Neighbors," she said and made a face. Her followers left 2,300 laughing emojis. Walter watched her go. He said nothing. He went back inside and called Bobby Dutchin. "Bobby," he said, "I may have a situation." It started with the lavender. The lavender bed ran along the property line, a 3-foot wide strip of Aliner's Provence lavender, silver green and heavy with fragrance in late July. Walter had edged that bed every spring for 30 years. He knew exactly where his property ended. He had the survey on file in a manila folder in the second drawer of his oak desk, right next to his discharge papers. In her 2nd week on the street, Meredith hired a landscaping crew to expand her front garden area. They showed up in a white pickup on a Tuesday morning with shovels and black plastic edging and a load of white river rock that Meredith had called clean and Scandinavian in her latest reel. They started digging into the lavender bed. Walter saw it from his front window. He put on his shoes, the brown leather ones, polished, picked up his walnut cane and walked outside. He was calm. He was always calm. "Excuse me," he said to the crew chief. "You're working into my property line." The crew chief, a decent young man named Marco who was just doing the job he'd been hired for, pulled out his phone and called Meredith. Meredith came outside in a linen set that probably cost $300. She looked at Walter. She looked at the lavender. She looked at her phone, already recording. "So I actually had someone look at the property lines," she said, "and I'm pretty sure this strip is technically part of my lot." She had not had anyone look at the property lines. "Ma'am," Walter said, "I have a survey in my home that tells a different story. You're welcome to come see it." "I mean, I'd love to," she said, "but I'm kind of in the middle of something. Can we maybe do this another time?" She turned back toward her phone, angling her profile to catch the light. Walter looked at the lavender. He looked at the crew. "Stop digging," he said. The crew stopped. There was something in his voice that made them stop, not loudness, certainty. Marco called it a day. Meredith went back inside. That night she posted a video. "Update on the neighbor situation," she said, looking into the camera with wide eyes. "So apparently my neighbor thinks he owns my property. Very fun start to the Clover Hill era. More updates to come." The comments section lit up. "Get a lawyer, babe. Document everything. Is he cute at least, law?" She laughed at that one. She pinned it. "Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation, where you do everything right, stay calm, follow the rules, offer to talk, and the other person treats it like a weakness? Drop a comment and tell me your story, because I promise you Walter knows exactly how you feel." And he was just getting started. Here's what Meredith Calloway-Shaw did not know about Walter Bay. She did not know that he had installed a Lorex 4K 8-camera security system in 2019, not because he was paranoid, but because his granddaughter in Raleigh had insisted after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. The cameras covered every angle of his property, his driveway, the street in front of his house, and crucially, the property line shared with number 5. She did not know that he kept a green composition notebook on the kitchen table. Every incident went into the notebook: date, time, description, camera timestamp, every single one. July 18, 7:22 a.m., Meredith's film crew arrived with 2 ring lights and a reflector panel. They set up on her front lawn. Part of the reflector panel extended 18 inches past the property line onto Walter's grass. He photographed it. He noted it. He said nothing. July 23, 11:40 a.m., a bag of potting soil, a broken plastic planter, and what appeared to be a half-eaten takeout container were deposited in the lavender bed. Camera footage showed Meredith carrying these items from her porch. She appeared to believe the lavender bed was a shared zone and thus appropriate for her overflow debris. Walter removed the items, photographed the bed, noted the timestamp. July 29, 9:15 p.m. A brand partnerships call Meredith outdoors on her porch on speaker, during which she described her new neighborhood as very old money/retirement community vibes. "I'm basically the only person under 70 on the whole street," and laughed. Her porch microphone did not seem to know it was outside Walter's range. His camera did. He noted it. He said nothing. August 3rd, the fence came down. Not the whole fence, just the section between their front yards. Meredith had hired the crew back. This time, without consulting Walter, without notifying the HOA, without a permit, she had the crew pull up the 14 feet of wooden slat fence that separated their front yards and haul it away. When Walter came outside, she was standing in the now open space with her phone on a gimbal, turning slowly in a wide shot. "Oh," she said, seeing him. "Hi, doesn't it feel so much more open?" "That fence was on my property," Walter said. "I mean, it was right on the line. The posts were on my side of the line." She tilted her head. "Walter, can I call you Walter? I really think we could just share this space. It would be so cute, very European." He looked at her for a long moment. "Put the fence back," he said. She did not put the fence back. He noted it. He photographed the empty post holes still on his side of the survey line. He noted the contractor name on the truck: Piedmont Landscape and Hardscape, LLC, Greensboro, NC. He called his attorney. August 9th, the HOA received a complaint. Not from Walter, about Walter. Meredith had filed a formal HOA complaint, 3 pages. printed on her branded letterhead, which included her social media handles, alleging that Walter's flagpole constituted an aesthetic violation of the Clover Hill Lane HOA guidelines, that his truck was being parked too close to the curb and creating a sightline obstruction, and that his garage door, which was original to the 1974 construction of the house, was visually inconsistent with the neighborhood's standard. The HOA president, a mild man named Dennis Firth who sold insurance and had lived on the street for 11 years, read the complaint 3 times. He called Walter. "Walter," he said, "I'm sorry, I have to forward this to the board." "I know, Dennis," Walter said, "forward it." He made a copy, put it in the folder, called his attorney again. And then came August 17th. It was a Thursday morning, warm and still. The hydrangeas were fatting. Meredith had been planning the video for 2 weeks. She'd workshopped the concept with her content strategy community, a Discord server of 200 fellow influencers who traded brand deal rates and viral hooks. The concept, front yard glow up, transforming a neighborhood block. The video required her front yard to be completely clear of visual distractions. The flagpole, she had decided, was a visual distraction. She had no legal mechanism to force its removal. She had lost the HOA complaint. The board, which included a retired schoolteacher who had known Alina Bay for 20 years, had dismissed all 3 allegations. She had been sent a politely worded letter explaining that the flagpole predated the HOA's formation and was therefore grandfathered from aesthetic review. She had other ideas. At 8:47 in the morning, with her ring light on the sidewalk and her phone propped against a potted fiddle leaf fig she'd hauled outside for the shot, Meredith Calloway-Shaw walked across the property line, grabbed Walter Bay's flagpole with both hands, and yanked. The pole didn't come out of the concrete base. She pulled harder. The bracket at the top, the one that held the flag itself, was an older 2-screw mount, and under sustained pressure it gave. The flag came loose. She pulled it down, folded it not correctly, not the triangle fold, just a rough bundle, carried it across the yard and tossed it into the lavender bed. Then she went back and grabbed the pole itself. It was a removable telescoping insert, she'd figured, and yanked that loose too. She looked into the phone camera and smiled. "There," she said, "that's better." She had 340,000 followers. She was also standing on someone else's property, removing a military veteran's American flag from its post, on camera, while a Lorex 4K security system recorded every frame in crystal clarity from 3 simultaneous angles. On the porch, Walter Bay sat in his rocking chair. He had seen it happen through the front window. He had walked out quietly during the middle of it. He had sat down. He watched the flag hit the lavender bed. He reached for his coffee, took a sip, set it down. He looked at Meredith Calloway-Shaw for a long moment, a long, flat, ancient look, the look of a man who had stared at harder things than this and walked away from all of them, and he said nothing. He stood up, picked up his cane, went inside. He picked up the flag from the lavender, slowly, carefully, the way you handle something sacred, and brought it inside with him. He sat at the kitchen table. He opened the green composition notebook. He wrote August 17, 2022, 8:47 a.m., flag removed from pole by neighbor, flag deposited in lavender, camera timestamp confirmed, called Robert. Then he called Bobby Dutchine. "Bobby," he said, "it's time. Now let me tell you something. If you think Walter Bay was going to let this go, you've never met a man who carried another man 3 miles through frozen mud at 19 years old. If you think this was over, you don't know what patience looks like in a person who has been waiting their whole life to do the right thing the right way." The right way was coming. And it was going to be something to see. Here's what nobody knew at the time. Well, almost nobody. Bobby Dutchine knew. Bobby Dutchine had always known. Because Bobby Dutchine, the man Walter had carried through the snow at the Chasson Reservoir, had spent the 30 years after his military service working as a senior investigator for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. He'd retired in 2008, but retirement in Bobby Dutchine's world meant no longer on payroll. It did not mean no longer knows everyone. Bobby's son, James Dutchine, was a federal attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, currently assigned to the Western District of North Carolina. Bobby's daughter-in-law, James's wife, Patricia, was a licensed surveyor. And Patricia Dutching had, at Walter's request, quietly surveyed the shared property line between 5 and 7 Clover Hill Lane in late July 2022, 3 days after the lavender incident. The results were not ambiguous. The property line was exactly where Walter had said it was. The lavender bed, all of it, was on Walter's land. The wooden fence posts that Meredith's crew had removed, also on Walter's land. The area Meredith had rocked over with white Scandinavian river stones, on Walter's land. And here's what else nobody knew. Meredith Calloway-Shaw's front yard glow-up video, the one she'd posted that Thursday morning, triumphant, the flag removal right at the top of the clip, her smiling over it, had been live for 4 hours before someone in Laurel Creek recognized the street. They shared it in a local Facebook group, Laurel Creek Community Board Official. The post read, "Does anyone know this woman? She just ripped a Korean War vet's flag off his own pole and threw it in his yard. This is our street." It got 847 shares in 6 hours. Then it got picked up by a Facebook page called Honor Our Veterans USA, which had 2.1 million followers. From there it went to Twitter. From there it went to Reddit, specifically the subreddit r/public/freakout, where the clip accumulated 94,000 upvotes in 18 hours, and the comment section became something that Meredith's PR instincts, if she'd had any, should have told her to fear. From Reddit, it went to 3 television stations. WFMY News 2 in Greensboro called the Laurel Creek HOA on Friday morning. Dennis Firth, mild insurance-selling Dennis Firth, confirmed that yes, there was an ongoing property dispute. He confirmed that yes, the flagpole had been on the property for over 40 years. He confirmed that yes, the flag belonged to a Korean War veteran. He did not say Walter's name. Walter had asked him not to. By Friday afternoon, Meredith Calloway-Shaw's TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube were under siege. Not metaphorically. Her notification counts had maxed out. Her comment sections, she'd turned them off, then on, then off again, were something she could no longer look at. She posted a response video, bright ring light, soft music underneath, script clearly memorized. "I want to address something that is being completely taken out of context," she said. "The flagpole was in a disputed property zone and I was acting within what I understood to be my rights. I have huge respect for veterans. My uncle served. I want to personally reach out to my neighbor and make this right." She had not reached out to her neighbor. She had, in fact, sent him a text message. She'd gotten his number from the HOA directory that read, "Hi Walter, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can talk. Also, I'd love to gift you some product from one of my wellness partners as a peace offering lol." Walter showed the text message to his attorney. His attorney, a woman named Sandra Cho, who had practiced property and civil litigation in Guilford County for 23 years and had the unhurried confidence of someone who never lost a case she cared about, was already working on 3 separate filings. 1. A civil trespass claim. Meredith had crossed the property line, removed fixtures from Walter's property, and deposited those fixtures in his lavender bed. The security camera footage, 8 cameras, 4K resolution, timestamp, documented all of it. Sandra had reviewed the footage herself. "This is not ambiguous," she told Walter. "This is the most documented trespass I have seen in 23 years of practice." 2. A property damage claim. The fence posts that Meredith's crew had removed, the ones in Walter's side of the line, had been set in concrete in 1989. Their removal had damaged the surrounding ground, disrupted the lavender root system in the adjacent bed, and removed a fixture that Walter had paid to install. The contractor, Piedmont Landscape and Hardscape, had carried out the work without a permit and without confirming property boundaries. They had liability exposure. Significant liability exposure. 3. And this is where it gets very interesting. Sandra Cho had been doing her due diligence, as Sandra Cho always did, and in researching Meredith Calloway-Shaw's background, she'd found something. In 2021, Meredith had entered into a brand partnership agreement with a supplement company called VitaSync Wellness. The agreement included a social media promotion clause, a revenue-sharing structure, and a representation by Meredith that her audience metrics, follower counts, engagement rates, demographic data, were accurate and independently verifiable. They were not. Meredith had purchased approximately 80,000 followers on Instagram, and a similar number of inflated engagement metrics through a third-party service based in Cyprus. Sandra had found this via standard influencer audit tool, the same tools that brand compliance officers used, and the numbers were not subtle. Her real engaged audience was approximately 40% of what she'd represented to Vita Sync. Vita Sync Wellness had paid Meredith $48,000 over 14 months. Under the agreement's misrepresentation clause, that created liability. Vita Sync Wellness had not yet discovered this. They were about to. Sandra Cho called James Dutchine, Bobby's son, the DOJ attorney, not on official business, on a Sunday afternoon as friends. "James," she said, "tell me what you know about FTC disclosure requirements for influencer marketing." "Oh," James said, "I know quite a bit." It was a Tuesday morning in September. September 6, 2022. The kind of morning that North Carolina does better than almost anywhere, cool and blue, the light coming long and golden through the oaks, the kind of air that smells like the end of summer and the beginning of something. Walter Bay woke at 5:15 as he always did. He made his coffee, dark roast, black, the same way he'd been drinking it since 1951, and sat in the kitchen for a while with the green notebook on the table in front of him, closed. He didn't need to open it. He knew every entry. Bobby Dutchine had driven up from Raleigh the night before. He was staying in the guest room. He was 88 years old and walked with 2 canes now, but he had driven 4 hours in his Buick because Walter had called and said it's time, and that was the only reason Bobby Dutchine had ever needed. They had coffee together in the kitchen, the 2 men who had survived the Chasson Reservoir together, and they didn't talk much. They didn't need to. At 9:15, Sandra Cho arrived. At 9:30, the first car came down Clover Hill Lane. A Guilford County Sheriff's vehicle, a white Ford Interceptor, pulled up in front of number 5. Behind it, a black Dodge Charger with state plates. Behind that, a gray Jeep Grand Cherokee that Patricia Dutchine stepped out of, carrying a red-staked property survey rod and a rolled tube of documents. Meredith Calloway-Shaw came to her window. She could be seen clearly on Walter's camera, camera 6, northeast angle, peering through her linen curtain, still in pajamas. The deputy knocked on her door. She opened it slowly, still in the pajamas, hair not done. The ring light was nowhere in sight. The deputy was polite. He was always polite. He explained that he was serving several documents simultaneously and that she should probably get her attorney on the phone. He handed her the first document. Civil Complaint, Guilford County Superior Court. Walter James Bay v. Meredith Calloway-Shaw. Trespass, conversion of property, tortious interference with property rights, intentional destruction of personal property, unauthorized removal of a permanent fixture. He handed her the second document. A letter from the Laurel Creek HOA, co-signed by 11 of the 14 households on Clover Hill Lane, formally notifying her that a special board meeting had been called to review her membership status and her ongoing violations of community standards. He handed her the third document. A certified letter from Vita Sync Wellness, LLC, from their legal department, informing her that they had completed an independent audit of her social media metrics and had determined that the representation of follower counts and engagement rates in her 2021 agreement had been materially false. They were invoking the misrepresentation clause. They were seeking return of $48,000 in brand payments, plus consequential damages. Their letter was dated the previous Friday. And then Patricia Dutchine walked up with the survey rod. Right up to the property line, she planted the stake at the exact surveyed boundary. She unrolled the documents. She photographed the stakes. She photographed the flagpole location, the concrete base still in the ground, still on Walter's property at a measurable and documented distance from the boundary. Then the news van arrived. WFMY2, they'd gotten a tip from a viewer who'd followed the story on social media. They set up across the street. They were not on anyone's property. They were on the public street. They were allowed to be there. A reporter knocked on Meredith's door. She did not answer. On the porch of number 7, Walter Bay sat in his rocking chair. Bobby Dutchine had pulled a second chair out from inside and sat beside him. 2 old men with their coffees, the morning sun coming warm over the oak trees, the lavender bed at the foot of the porch steps, still silver green, still fragrant. The reporter, having given up on number 5, crossed the yard toward number 7. Walter held up one hand. "I appreciate you coming," he said. "I don't have anything to say." The reporter nodded. She looked at the empty bracket on the porch column where the flagpole had been remounted the previous weekend, the flag back in its proper place, flying clean in the September morning. "How long have you lived here, sir?" she asked. "Since 1978, Walter said. "And you served in Korea?" "I served," he said. She thanked him. She went back to her van. She had everything she needed for the story, which aired at 6 p.m. and at 11 p.m. and which was picked up by the AP Wire the following morning. The total amount sought in the civil suit was $214,000 in damages, plus legal fees, plus costs of survey, plus punitive damages for willful trespass. Sandra Cho believed they would settle for close to full value. She was right, but that came later. By the afternoon of September 6th, Clover Hill Lane was quiet again. The sheriff's cars had gone, Patricia Dutching had gone, the news van had gone. The property survey stakes stood at the boundary line like small red flags, precise, inarguable, silent. Meredith Calloway-Shaw's house was dark. Her car's, the pearl-white Porsche Cayenne, was in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. The ring light was not set up outside. The fiddle leaf fig had been brought back in. The neighbors came out one by one, the way neighbors do when something big has just quietly happened. Patricia Kowalski from the corner with her tomatoes. Dennis Firth from down the street. The Henderson kids on their bikes, circling the cul-de-sac slowly, sensing something they couldn't name. Nobody stood on Meredith's side of the new survey stakes. Nobody knocked on her door to check if she was all right. Nobody waved. Mrs. Kowalski walked across to number 7 and set a bag of tomatoes on the porch railing. She didn't knock, she just set them there and walked back home. Walter saw her from the window. He would make bruschetta later. Bobby liked bruschetta. Inside number 5, Meredith was on the phone with her attorney, a Durham-based entertainment lawyer who primarily handled podcast contracts and had exactly zero experience in property litigation. He told her things she didn't want to hear. She called her mother. Her mother told her to come home to Charlotte for a while. She posted nothing that day, or the next day, or the 3 days after that. For a creator who posted every day, who had built her identity on visibility, on the assumption that her camera was always the most powerful thing in any room, the silence was its own kind of verdict. Here's what happened next, and I'll tell it the way Walter told it when Bobby asked him, a year later, sitting on the same porch with the same coffees. Slowly, Walter said, and then all at once. Meredith's lawsuit settled in March of 2023. The final number was $189,000, which included property damages, legal fees, the survey costs, and a structured payout for the removal of the fence and the disturbance of the lavender bed. Her entertainment lawyer had advised her to fight it. Sandra Cho had submitted 63 pages of camera footage logs, survey documentation, and certified HOA correspondence as evidence. Meredith's team settled in 30 days. VitaSync Wellness won their separate case in arbitration 6 months later. Meredith repaid $48,000 and agreed to a non-disparagement clause. The FTC, which had been monitoring the case peripherally, James Dutching had known the right person to notify as a matter of public record, opened a broader audit of the third-party follower inflation service Meredith had used. Several other influencers were caught in the net. Meredith was fined an additional $12,000 by the FTC for disclosure violations and ordered to complete a remediation program. Her YouTube channel lost its monetization for 3 months. Her brand deal pipeline collapsed. By December of 2023, her follower count had dropped to 80,000, the real ones, roughly, stripped of the inflated numbers. She moved out of number 5 in February 2024. The house sold in April. The buyers were a young couple, a teacher and an electrician, who moved in with 2 dogs and a baby on the way. They introduced themselves to Walter on their first weekend. They brought a pie. Walter invited them in. He showed them the lavender bed, told them about Aliner and Provence and the smell of the Mediterranean in summer. The teacher, whose name was Grace, crouched down and ran her fingers through the silver-green leaves. "It smells amazing," she said. "It does," Walter said. The flagpole stood tall in the September light. The flag turned slow in the afternoon breeze. In the spring of 2024, Walter and Grace planted new lavender together along the border, a slightly wider bed, properly surveyed, documented in Patricia Dutching's records. They planted a variety called hidcote, which blooms deep purple, and which Alina had always said was her favorite. Bobby Dutching drove up to see it when it bloomed. Two old men, two canes between them, standing in a yard full of purple flowers. "Not bad, Walt," Bobby said. "No," Walter said, "not bad. You know, folks, I've thought about this story a long time. I've thought about what it means that a 91-year-old man, a man who fought through frozen mountains in Korea, who carried his friend through enemy fire, who buried his wife and tended her lavender garden for 30 years, had to fight in his own front yard for the right to fly his own flag. I've thought about what it means that the person who challenged him thought her camera was her power, thought her followers were her armor, thought visibility was the same thing as being right. She wasn't right, and in the end, the camera turned against her, because Walter Bay had 8 cameras of his own and his were pointed at the truth. There's something I want you to carry with you when you leave this story. Walter Bay never raised his voice, not once. He documented. He called his attorney. He called his friend. He sat on his porch and drank his coffee and let the world do what the world does when it is given enough time and enough documented evidence. He did not need to win loudly. He just needed to be right and to wait. There is a kind of person, and maybe you know one, maybe you've loved one, maybe you are one who has been through the kind of things that change a person down to the foundation. That kind of person doesn't scare easy. That kind of person doesn't need to perform. They've already proven what they're made of in places and moments that most of us will never see. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. And never ever pick a fight with someone who survived the Chasen Reservoir, who buried his wife on a Tuesday and tended her garden on Wednesday, who keeps a green notebook and a good attorney and a best friend who drives 4 hours on a Sunday when it's time. Because those men, they've already seen the worst thing the world can do. Your ring light doesn't scare them. Your followers don't scare them. Nothing about you scares them. And on the porch of number 7, Clover Hill Lane, Laurel Creek, North Carolina, on a blue September morning with the lavender silver-green along the fence line and the flag turning slow in the warm air, Walter James Bay drank his coffee. And he was home. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.